Dust hung low across the street of Dry Creek, rising in lazy curls every time a wagon wheel rolled through. It was the kind of town where whispers cut deeper than knives, where every shuttered glance carried judgment. On the wooden steps of the trading post sat a girl no older than 12. Her dress was worn thin, her shoes held together with twine. She clutched a sack of her meager belongings the way a drowning soul clings to driftwood. Her name was Clara Mayfield, the last breath of a family that had been swallowed whole by hardship. Her mama had been sold. That was the word Dry Creek used. Into a marriage she never wanted, her body and spirit exchanged for coin when debts outweighed dignity. Clara had watched it all, her young eyes holding the imprint of shame she could not yet name. Now the girl sat alone, waiting, abandoned by the distant kin who decided she was one mouth too many to feed. The townsfolk watched. They always did. Some pitied her in silence. Others muttered that she's cursed like her mama. A few even looked at her with the same calculating eyes they'd once turned on the mother, wondering if this child, too, might someday be sold. Clara did not cry at first. She sat straight, stiff as a post, her lips trembling but dry. But when an old ranch hand passing by stopped to ask, "What'll become of you now, girl?" she broke. Her voice carried down the street like a whip crack. "Sold like Mama was." The words fell heavy. Some turned away, uncomfortable. Others smirked. The cruelty of gossip made flesh. And then, at the far edge of the crowd, stood a man who did not look away. His name was Jonah Callahan, 35, shoulders broad from years of wrangling cattle, his skin darkened by sun and weather. His ranch lay 5 miles outside town, a spread of open prairie and pine where the wind ran freer than most men ever did. Jonah had known loneliness in his bones, an inheritance carved by loss and silence. He was not a man of many words. Folks in town called him stoic, some said strange, a few whispered dangerous. But Jonah kept to himself, carrying the weight of his past like a saddle never taken off. Something in Clara's cry struck him raw, not because of pity, not even out of charity, but because he heard in her voice the echo of his own younger self. Abandoned once, shamed once, cast aside like unwanted stock. Jonah stepped forward. His boots rang heavy on the planks. "Who's claiming this girl?" he asked, his voice low but steady. No one answered. A few eyes narrowed. The shopkeeper shrugged. "She's no one's," he finally said. "Can drop her here. Best the town find someone to take her off." Jonah's gaze settled on Clara, who sat frozen, her tears cutting pale tracks down her dusty cheeks. He knelt before her, lowering himself so she could see his eyes, steady, weathered, unflinching. "You're not for sale," he said. Just 4 words, but the ground shifted beneath her. The townsfolk murmured. A widow shook her head. "Jonah, don't saddle yourself with that curse." Jonah ignored them. He extended his calloused hand. "Come, my ranch has got room." Clara stared at it like it was a snake or a miracle, something she could not trust, yet longed to. Slowly, she reached, and with that small gesture, the course of 2 lives bent toward one another. The ride to Jonah's ranch was silent, but alive with tension. Clara sat stiff in the saddle before him, the horse's steady gait jostling her thin frame. She kept waiting for his kindness to dissolve, for him to turn cruel, for the promise to be a lie. That was the world she knew. But Jonah simply guided the horse home, his arms a respectful distance, his silence not heavy but protective. At the ranch, Clara saw wide fields rolling out like a green sea, cattle grazing under a painted sky, and a cabin that leaned but held, like its owner. Inside, the air smelled of wood smoke and leather. Jonah set her small sack on a chair and said, "You'll have your own room. Ain't much, but it's yours." Clara pressed her palm to the doorframe, as if testing if it were real. Then she whispered, "I never had a room." Something inside Jonah cracked quietly. He didn't speak, but he fetched a quilt, laying it at the foot of her bed without ceremony. That night, Clara lay awake in a bed softer than any she had known, staring at the ceiling beams. And for the first time in her young life, she did not fear being sold in the morning. But Dry Creek was not kind to memory or to mercy. Word spread quick that Jonah Callahan had taken in Clara Mayfield. Tongues wagged at the saloon. "Mark my words, he's after something. No man gives shelter free." Others whispered the child was cursed, that she'd bring ruin to his ranch same as her mama had been ruined. Clara heard it too. Each trip into town was a trial, her small shoulders bracing against the smirks and stares. One afternoon, standing by Jonah's side at the blacksmith, she caught two women whispering, "Poor girl. She'll end up just like her mama." Heat surged through Clara's face. Shame, sharp and hot, cut her breath. Without thinking, she blurted, "I ain't like her. I ain't for sale." The street went quiet. Every eye turned. Jonah placed his hand gently but firmly on her shoulder, grounding her. His voice carried slow and steady, each word a stake in the ground. "She's my daughter. You speak ill of her. You answer to me." The words hung heavy, undeniable. For Clara, they rang like church bells, startling, holy, terrifying. She looked up at Jonah, eyes wide. "Daughter." Her throat burned. She couldn't speak, but deep inside, something that had been broken began, just barely, to mend. And yet, Clara knew, this was only the beginning. Clara grew into the ranch like a wildflower breaking through hard soil. She fed the chickens, learned to churn butter, even helped Jonah mend fence posts. Each day, she tested the edges of trust, and each day Jonah's quiet steadiness held. But shadows lingered. At night, Clara would sometimes wake screaming, the old terror clawing up from memory. Jonah never spoke of it, never pried. He would simply sit outside her door until she drifted back to sleep, a silent sentinel in the hush of the prairie. Slowly, their home became less a shelter and more a bond. And yet the town's eyes never softened. Trouble came sharp one July morning. A man named Silas Crow, known for gambling and sharper cruelty, came riding to Jonah's gate. "I hear you got yourself astray," he sneered, eyeing Clara as she gathered eggs. "What's the price for her?" Clara froze, her blood cold. The words were too familiar, the nightmare reborn. Jonah stepped forward, jaw tight. "She ain't for sale." Silas laughed, spitting tobacco into the dust. "Everything's for sale, Callahan. You best remember that." He rode off, but his shadow lingered. That night, Clara sat on the porch, knees pulled to her chest. Jonah lit his pipe, the glow soft against the dark. "Why'd he say that?" she whispered. Jonah's voice was slow, heavy with truth. "'Cause men like him don't see people. They see property. Your mama knew that. You've known it too young. But listen to me, Clara. You're not what the town calls you. You're not what Silas sees. You're mine. You're free." The words burrowed deep, but healing is never sudden. Clara turned away, afraid to believe. 2 weeks later, the storm broke. Silas returned, this time drunk and armed, swaggering into town with talk that Jonah was keeping a girl for himself. The gossip lit like wildfire. The sheriff, wary of Jonah's reclusive ways, did little. That evening, as Jonah and Clara walked back from the creek, they saw smoke rising. Their barn, ablaze. Clara screamed. Jonah rushed forward, loosing the animals, his face lit by firelight. Silas stood in the distance, laughing, pistol in hand. The town gathered, watching. No one moved to help. Clara trembled, her chest tight. This was it, the curse they all believed. She wanted to run, to disappear, to save Jonah from her shadow. But Jonah turned, soot streaked across his face, eyes fierce. "You listen to me, Clara Mayfield," he said, his voice cutting through flame and fear. "You ain't cursed. You ain't for sale. You're my daughter, and no man alive will take that from us." Something surged in Clara then, terror and love twisted into courage. She ran, not away, but toward Silas, her small hands grabbing at his arm. Shocked, he stumbled, his pistol firing into the dirt. Jonah was there in an instant. One blow sent Silas sprawling. The sheriff, shamed by inaction, finally stepped forward, hauling Silas away. The barn smoldered, half ruined, but Jonah's arms were around Clara, fierce and unyielding. She sobbed into his chest, the old words spilling out. "Sold. Like Mama was." Jonah knelt, tilting her chin so she met his eyes. "No," he said, steady as stone. "You're chosen. Do you hear me? Not sold, chosen." The crowd stood silent. For once, no gossip, no smirks, just the crackle of fire and the weight of truth. In the weeks that followed, The barn was rebuilt. Neighbors, shamed into action, lending their hands. Clara walked through town, no longer hunched by shame, but lifted by Jonah's quiet claim. And on the first Sunday after the barn fire, Jonah stood in the church doorway with Clara's hand in his. To every stare, he gave the same answer, steady and unwavering. "She's my daughter." Clara smiled then, small, shy but real. And the seed of belonging, buried deep in her, finally broke ground. If you've ever felt cast aside, measured by others' cruelty, or named by their gossip, you know Clara's story. The world will try to sell you, trade you, define you. But dignity is not for sale. Family's not a bargain. Sometimes it takes just one steady hand, one soul who calls you their own, to remind you that you are never property. You are always priceless. And in that truth, there is freedom.